I want to bring back to that initial conversation. I'm curious to know, because finding co-founders is a critical thing to have and done right in the early days. How did the conference pan out? Like, probably you guys were planning to talk for half an hour, but it went on for much longer. But what happens afterwards that get to the point where officially you are co-creating this company?
I mean, I think as with any difficult thing, it's important to define a goal for yourself and the criteria that you're using to understand what will fit it, and then jump off from there. And I had approached a couple of other people as potential co-founders prior, because I find that for myself, I work better with another person. And for whatever reason, couldn't quite find the right fit. Wasn't the right time for them financially. They weren't in a place in their life where they felt like they could make a big shift, whatever. And I thought it was really important to find someone who's coming at this from a similar sort of life experience in software leadership as me. And thankfully, in one of the fun things about working on this product is that because it's geared towards software leaders, if you are one and if you know some, you end up meeting a lot of those folks, right? And so I feel, I think there's always a component of luck in these things, but I was pretty sure that I had a set of criteria that I was looking for. I needed someone who was trustworthy and collaborative. One thing I love about Aaron is that he's more cheerful and more enthusiastic than I am. I'm sort of the glum one here. So that I thought ticked a really important box for me, right? That we would have that dynamic to play off of. So I think we probably collaborated together for, in my memory, it was 3 or 4 weeks before we both kind of said, let's tie the knot, right? We bounced some ideas around. We wrote a little bit of code. We talked about what we wanted for the future of the company. And when we felt like our visions were sufficiently aligned and we had our ducks in a row, we sort of said, let's do this, right? And I think that was another thing that we really looked out with, is that we both had similar visions for the way we wanted to approach it and what we wanted to do from, whatever, an incorporation standpoint, a management standpoint, whatever. I think that was a happy accident. But at any point, if it hadn't worked out, I had given myself in that moment a budget of 2 months. I went back to my wife and I said, if I can't get this thing credibly to an interesting place in that amount of time, I promise I'll back out. I'll go find a real job somewhere else. And so I was sort of down to the wire on that stuff, but I really, really felt like we had something. And so it was at that moment, I think, that we sort of went with it.
I really appreciated the idea of giving yourself a budget of time or runway to sort of work out a problem. Because I'm also thinking of what if somebody is experimenting and testing a company idea and it doesn't work out? I think that a framework is really powerful. Are there other, for both of you, are there other conversations you would encourage people to have with a potential co-founder to ensure that people are on the same page? Like, I guess, are there other conversations that you had with each other that really helped calibrate your frame of thinking, getting aligned on expectations and the vision that you would say, this is a must-have conversation at the beginning of this period?
Oh God. I think the first question on my list, I don't know if I ever shared the whole list with you, Aaron, but the first question I had on the list was, how have you dealt in the past with a colleague who's underperforming, but that you can't fire? Oh God. Give me, what's a time you haven't responded well when someone gave you feedback on something you cared about? I think these things get really emotional and passions run high, and it's important to be able to absorb those things. And then there was broader stuff I wanted to understand, how you were approaching and thinking about your role in the broader community, how you think companies should operate more generally. What role does a tech company play in the wider ecosystem? What obligations does it have to the people and the actors in that system? What's an example of a potential customer that you'd consider unacceptable to take on? Is there anyone you would bar from the platform, and why? And my answer is yes, there are. Clients I'd be reluctant to work with, I think. What habits do you think will serve you well? Which habits do you think you'll have to break? I think that's an important part of getting someone to think in advance about this stuff. And then I think my final one was let's stipulate for a minute that we've both been around the bend a little bit. We care about a work-life balance, but if something had to give, what would it be? What would give? And there you have it. Those are the things I was thinking about in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about when you're in a startup that's really small is, especially when it was just Brian and I kind of had a metric I was shooting for, which was So Brian, his spouse was pregnant when we got together, and I put a line in my head, which was get funded before baby arrives. That was my metric I'd made for myself, like get funded before baby arrives. And I was starting to get a little nervous in July because I knew we had about 4 more months at that time, according to at least my math at the time. So it was, okay, how do we make that happen? But also, in terms of the co-founder stuff, you just kind of having, this, everybody knows this is almost kind of trite to say, but complementary skill sets, I saw the opportunity, like every person that wants to be a co-founder and lead, the business from a product standpoint needs a good technical co-founder. And Brian is one of the best technical people I've known in my career, over 30 years. And so, to me, it was, holy hell, yeah, you got to work with this guy. This is an amazing chance. But also just kind of, somebody whose working style is compatible, somebody who has emotional resilience, somebody that will not overreact or underreact when issues do arise, and has that kind of almost like stoic, I'm not sure if that's the right nature about how they go through things, and that's been really helpful as well. Particularly because this is a ride. This is an emotionally draining ride, particularly when your idea gets rejected from 3 or 4 different VCs, and you start to wonder, is this thing really going to work? And yeah, you need to be able to ride that out.
It was one thing that struck me, when I was in my role through at Meetup during the start and then through the middle of or whatever era we're in right now, the COVID pandemic, that the people who did okay in the end were the ones who cultivated or found a way to cultivate resilience. This is an incredibly difficult time for a lot of us, right? There's been a lot of frayed nerves, a lot of stress. A lot of people are still, hanging on, if not by a thread, then struggling in a way that maybe they weren't a couple of years ago. And it's really important. It's more important now than ever, I think, to cultivate resilience, to cultivate a sense of stability, and finding a way to keep yourself grounded during this crazy time. And
I'm just also thinking the remark you made, Aaron, about the personal life OKR of get funded before Brian has a family multiplies. Brian,
I'm not very bright. Wait, let's stipulate that was a dumb idea.
But I think the thing is, Brian, for you in that moment, did it feel like Aaron really had your back as a co-founder to know that he was actively trying to support you in that way?
Yeah. I think that was it was great, actually. That was one of the things that really built trust between us, was feeling like we're aligned and able to move forward. I had founded a couple companies prior where we were convinced that either we wanted to bootstrap or we wanted to delay a raise as long as possible. And I found those partnerships to be really fragile because there was nothing keeping people together. One person could just sort of walk away, and that was that. And that was another component for me as well. And at every step along the journey, I actually thought that Aaron was great at being responsive and connecting along similar goals. We just felt aligned in a really, really helpful way.